But some people envy other people, imitate other people, step outside where they are, get smacked back down to where they are to make sure that they're living by true priorities, not somebody else's.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thank you. Now, I've heard you in some of your talks. You talk about mental illness and probably learning disabilities, and essentially in the modern day of medicine and all of that, they get to treat mental illness with medicine and all of that. But you've got a different view on the causes and actually how to treat things like mental illness. Can you just walk us through your way of thinking?
The pharmaceutical and medical model is based on chemistry. They're reductionistic, and they reduce the brain down into, lobes of the brain, and then from lobes into segments of the brain and loci of the brain, each loci into connectomes of various connections of nerves and pathways, and eventually down to nerves, and eventually down to the cytoplasmic components of the nerves, the cytoarchitectural structure, and then eventually down into molecules, and eventually into the atoms and the electronics, and they keep reducing it. And they believe that they'll find, and there's some validity to it, that they'll find new insights about human behavior. Mm-hmm. But for hundreds of years, they still haven't found the mind there. There's still, there's some people believe there is no mind. It's just biochemistry and neurology.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's transcendental functions that are hard to explain. The subjective experiences of consciousness are still hard to explain by biochemistry. And so there's models there that have, weaknesses, let's put it that way. Mm. So studying that, I've been fascinated by the mind or the brain. I taught neurology 43 years ago and taught neurology and neurochemistry and neural pathways and neuropathology and stuff. I've been fascinated by that, written a tremendous amount on that. But I'm just not satisfied with the idea that it's always a pharmaceutical solution. Because the reason I did that, I remember reading a book called Hormones in the Brain and studying how an individual with different ratios of different transmitters, signal molecules, modulators, regulators in the brain, how it affected behavior. And then I realized that if we change the behavior, we also change the chemistry. It worked both ways. And then we realized that the behavior was based on perceptions. So if I change the ratios of perceptions, I change neurochemistry. For instance, let's say you're in a room and all of a sudden the door opens and a 14-foot tiger comes running towards you and reaches and leaps in the air with its fangs salivating and about to eat you. If I had a Men in Black pen and I just stopped it right when it's about to put its head on you, its jaws on you, and then did your neurochemistry, your cortisol, your osteocalcin, your norepinephrine would be out the roof. Substance P would be up, dopamine would be down. A lot of chemistries would be skewed in that split second within 200 milliseconds of that perception. And then you go, well, he's got a biochemical imbalance. No, he's got a perception of a tiger about to eat him, and his chemistry is doing its job. But what happens now, let's say we have an event in life. And by the way, if that tiger turned out to be Tony Tiger, and he puts his arms around you and says, I'm Tony Tiger, you're great. Yeah. And all your life you want to meet Tony Tiger, and all of a sudden your chemistry swaps and you get dopamine and serotonin, and oxytocin for hugging him and bonding with him. Your hero's there. Then you made your chemistry's change in 200 milliseconds. Yeah. But what happens is if we have an event occur that we're highly infatuated with or highly resentful to, and then never balance it and return our chemistry homeostatically, and we store that as an emotion, it skews our chemistry. And we then want to blame the biochemistry as the cause, but it's actually correlative, not causal necessarily. And I'd rather go in there and give people their power back than having to depend on a medication if possible. Since not all the psychiatric medications are as effective as we'd like. I'd like to go in there and show them how to ask new set of questions, be conscious of what information that was unconscious, become fully conscious of what's there, center their own perceptions, and change their chemistries and stabilize their emotions. And I'm absolutely certain it works because I've been doing it on hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. Wow.
And a lot of people are not taking medications now, and they did when they started.
I guess the trick or the thing is in being able to create that event that will change your chemical makeup in the body, I guess, isn't it?
Well, every time you change your perceptions, you're changing your chemistry.
Yeah.
If I started telling you about how great you are and how amazing you are and everything else, your serotonin's going up because your pride's going up. If I start cutting you down, your serotonin would go down.
Yeah.
That's it. And your oxytocin would go down because you wouldn't trust me anymore. And these chemistries are, every one of those neurotransmitters that we're finding and neuroregulators, we can change their ratios by asking questions and make you cognizant of things you weren't thinking of and changing. Wow. That's my specialty. That's what I love helping people do in their power back.
Wow. And I guess is that the reason why people would go to some, let's say, motivation events, and because of the buzz and the perception, feel quite on a high that they can do anything, and then over time, once that subsides, they find that they are not as motivated or as excited.
Motivation is an extrinsic thing that most of the time with rhetorical persuasion leads people into fantasies that aren't really congruent with what they value. And that's why it's short-lived. It sets up a fantasy, and then eventually the reality hits and it falls into a crash. I'm not interested in motivation. I'm not a motivational speaker. I think that's a symptom, not a solution for humanity. Yeah. A solution for humanity is finding out what is intrinsically valuable to the individual and giving them the feedback from that to structure their life by priority and start filling their day with high priority actions which activate the blood glucose and oxygen into the forebrain, where the medial prefrontal cortex, the executive center, can govern the impulses and instincts that normally distract us from doing great things. And anytime we're fulfilling our highest values, we're not unfulfilled and therefore looking for immediate gratification through immediate gratifying consuming things or drugs or alcohol or whatever to compensate. So a fulfilled life doesn't need to be filled full with food and candy and sweets and drugs. It's fulfilled. And so I'm a firm believer of prioritizing life. That's a very important thing to have people ask what is truly, determine what's really valuable and structure their life according to priorities and live by priority. Every time you live by the highest value, you raise your self-worth, your confidence, you expand your space and time horizons, you give yourself permission to achieve more, you walk your talk, your confidence emerges, your self-worth goes up and your leadership capacities emerge. So it's to our advantage to stick to priorities in life.
Yeah. And how does the influence of people that people see as maybe influential people who can actually direct them or teach them something that they can actually help them to achieve something? Could be, you see this a lot in like religious circles or in some situations will be mentors, and people will actually look up to those people and maybe rightly or wrongly believe that they have something that can help them either become a better version of themselves. Is there a role that these mentors or people with influence play in directing people's direction of where they can take their life into?
It can be. It depends. Many times you'll go for a mentor because you admire them. And if the mentor's objectives and values are close enough to yours where you can live by what they're advising, then it works great.
Yeah.
But if for some reason you look up to somebody and they're not really in line with your values, you're going to end up having an internal conflict and trying to subordinate to their expectations and what they recommend. Now, what I usually tell people to do is take the individuals that you admire most, identify what specific trait, action, inaction they're displaying or demonstrating that you admire most, and then go look inside yourself for where you're already displaying them in your own values. And then when you realize that nothing's missing in you, it's already there, but you're not looking at it. You're trying to compare your form of it with their form of it and thinking it's missing. It's like a cat expecting to swim like a fish, or a fish expecting to climb a tree like a cat. The fish is perfectly capable of doing excellent work in swimming, but not climbing. So you got to make sure that there's enough alignment if you're going to put somebody as a mentor. Otherwise, you're going to beat yourself up trying to live up to their value system. So just make sure that there's some congruency and make sure that what they're leading you to is sound. Because, it's as Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, said, it's not that we don't know so much, we know so much that isn't so. And there's lots of mentors that are fervent about their conviction, but not necessarily leading down a path of wisdom.
Wow. And how can we sort of get ourselves out of setbacks, like life shocks that happen? It could be like a death, or people lose a job or something, and people can actually go down with that. How can we change our perception?
It's only a setback. It's only a setback when you choose to see it that way.
Yeah.
You have control of your perceptions, decisions, and actions. So if you take a perception and you see it as a setback, you're going to then decide and respond and act accordingly. But if you ask, how specifically is whatever's happened, the current reality, whatever's happened, how is it helping me fulfill what's most meaningful to me? My highest value, what inspires me, my mission in life, my purpose in life. How is it helping me? No, I didn't ask how it's in the way. How is it helping me?
Yeah.
Is it restructuring me? Is it making me come up with a more efficient pathway? Is it making me go through and ask for help? Is it making me go back and do harder studies on things? When you go and study people that excel, Michael Phelps, the swimmer, for instance, gold medalist, or Curtis, this gentleman who's going for the fastest man on his legs, the fastest runner in the world, you find out that they don't see anything but feedback. They don't see failure, they see feedback. They don't see setback, they see feedback to come back. So it's about how you ask, what's happening here? If you say, well, why is this happening to me? Why is it screwing me up? You're not going to get anywhere. You become victim of history, not master of destiny. But if you ask how specifically is what's happening right now, how's it help me move forward and accomplish what I dream about? Well, I was told I would never read, write, or communicate, never amount to thing, never go very far in life in first grade. Yeah. Well, I later learned how to read voluminously, 30,500 and something books now. I've traveled over 20 million miles. I've become financially independent many times over. I've influenced people around the world. The very thing I was told I would never do is the very thing I get to do today. So setbacks are not setbacks. They're basically seeds for comebacks.
Yeah. And I guess sometimes it's just difficult when you're in the moment to actually see what.
But that's because you're choosing to perceive only that setback.
Yeah.
If you're infatuated with somebody and distracted by an infatuation, a hot chick or whatever, you get infatuated. That's your choice. You chose to not look at the downsides and level that field. And if you're sitting there resenting about what's happened, it's your choice. You haven't looked at the upsides. Yeah. If you go and balance it out, you're back in command. If you're imbalanced, whatever you infatuate with, whatever you resent, whatever you attract or repel from, occupies space and time in your mind and runs you. You're extrinsically run. And people are victims of history that way. They don't empower their lives by doing that. The extract meaning out of our existence is taking and find the mean and center yourself again out of whatever's happening, so perturbations from the external world don't interfere with an intrinsic dream.
Yeah. Wow. So if I sort of just give you like a live example, in a way, just a random example, like I wrote this book which I was about to launch, and there was a build up and the marketing and everything, and then come launch day, all the Amazon stuff and everything didn't work, and the launch actually failed. It didn't happen. So in that moment, it's like everything has fallen apart.
No, what happened, Alex, is you exaggerated how that book was going to do in your mind without the strategies to get that outcome. Yeah. I think almost every book author goes through that.
Yeah.
I have a book that's been out for 24 years now.
Mm-hmm.
It's now in 39 languages.
Yeah.
But I think I sold maybe 25,000 copies the first 5 years. Didn't do all that well.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it started picking up in different cities and states as I went around, and then around different countries as I was speaking. Mm-hmm. And then it recently became number one in Lithuania and also in Turkey. It came big in Spain, Latin America. Don't even think if it doesn't take off. I've had books not sell but a few hundred copies at first. Some of the greatest classics only sold the first few. It's testing whether you're committed to getting your message out there and never giving up. That's all.
Wow.
When I launched a book one time, it was so funny. I launched a book and I hired a publicist to make sure I went across all the major cities. And I went into television arts, and I went across 48 states with television. I did all that stuff on there. And the publisher didn't have the book on time. So I was going in and supposedly signing a book that wasn't even in the bookstore.
Yeah.
I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a book that wasn't in the store yet.
Yeah. Wow.
The game.
Yeah.
You want to choke people sometimes because you're not seeing how it's on the way. But what it is a great story that inspires people later.
Yeah.
The book does get out there.
Yeah.
The book sells, and it's a matter of how committed you are in the long term, not about a short-term gratification.
Yeah. But I guess sometimes you get to realize, to have that knowledge later, way after the moment has passed, when you've gathered more wisdom and you've understood.
Well, that's a false attribution bias, as we say. We stop and look at how many people think about writing a book. Millions. How many actually get down to start writing the book? Hundreds of thousands. How many actually finish the book? Thousands. How many actually then publish it? Hundreds. How many actually get the book out there where it sells? 10 people.
Yeah.
That's the reality. So if you got a book published, Alex, that's a great success.